Everyone's scared of carbs nowadays, but carbs are a big source of, when you need like fluid to the muscle, or remember, I'm bodybuilding, so I'm looking for the roundest, fullest muscle tissue you can get to perform while you train. All right, my name is Jay Cutler. I'm a 4-time Miss Olympia. I've won also the Arnold Classic titles, 3 Arnold Classics in a row. I'm the only one actually to hold the Arnold Classic title 3 years in a row. Second most prestige title in bodybuilding, and I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. And I grew up in Massachusetts. Youngest of 7 kids, grew up on a farm. And my brother's still a farmer these days, still raising cattle. So I'm happy to be up here and doing this interview, and I want to thank everyone for their continuous support, and thank you guys for bringing me up. Finally, it's been a long time coming.
Cool.
So I grew up the youngest of 7 kids. I got 3 brothers, 3 sisters, and I started working at the age of 11. We actually had a concrete business. My brothers are still in the concrete business there. They're one of the more reputable people in concrete. So at age 11, I started doing that, but I was an active teenager. I actually picked up a magazine at 12 years old, and I saw a picture of Chris Dickerson, who was a former Mr. Olympia, and that's when I said I want to look like this. And of course, being a kid, you marvel over like superheroes, and you want to look like, Superman or whatever. So I was always intrigued by the muscle, and I actually didn't start training until I was 18 years old, but in high school I played football. I was just really limited what I could do for sports. The track team wanted me really bad, but I couldn't participate in a lot of the weekend events because I was working after school, weekends, and school vacations in the concrete business. And that taught me a lot of dedication. I give a lot of credit to what that did for me, because I was forced to get up before school, after school. I was doing chores on the farm, and I hated my parents at the time. I hated my dad, I hated my brothers, because there's a big age gap between my brother, who's the youngest to me. 3 brothers were born first, then my sisters, then myself. So I really kind of hated them because I was kind of forced to work, even though they were kind of raising me in a sense. And I ended up working, like I said, any free time I had was spent working while the other kids were going on vacations and doing fun things. I was a great football player. I was a defensive tackle and a running back. I was fast, I had a lot of speed, and I was very muscular because of starting to work at the age 11, working on the farm. I had a very rugged body, and a lot of my sisters and brothers' friends just say, does your brother lift weights? And I never toyed with any weights. No one trained in my family, but I had a really good stocky physique. So I saw that picture at 12, and I remember, in high school, I used to go to like they used to bring me to competitions. We'd have our football team would do these powerlifting competitions, and I would kill everybody in all the lifts, squat, deadlift. I mean, I benched 315 in high school. I didn't even know how to lift weights. So I had a lot of strength too. So for me, it was kind of like an ego thing where I decided at 18 I was pursuing a degree in criminal justice. I was going to college, and I stopped working the concrete. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to dedicate myself to the gym. I joined the gym my 18th birthday. It was 1991, August 3rd. I saved up $300, and I put a membership down at Gold's Gym in Worcester, Massachusetts, and that's when I started my quest in bodybuilding. Although I didn't know anything about lifting weights, I kind of sat and watched and learned, and at the time it was just magazines. So I would pick up scrap magazines at the gym, and I would learn. I tried to get a lot of people to help me, but no one would really give me the attention because I was just a young kid that, had a decent physique, athletic physique, but no one really wanted to give me the advice. So I kind of watched how everyone did everything wrong, because that's how everyone trains at most gyms. And I was the kid that if I saw any leg equipment in there, I would do every leg machine, every chest machine, every shoulder machine. So I kind of overtrained, but at the same time, my body still responded, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't doing the labor work. I was actually going to college, and I was eating. I learned about nutrition. I read about a lot of stuff about it. And for me, fortunately, I linked up with a nutritionist probably 6 months after training, named Chris Aceto, who's a big dietitian for a lot of the top guys. His ex-wife was actually second place runner-up at the Miss Olympia a few times. And he kind of took me under his wing and kind of wrote me out a diet, and I put it on my refrigerator. And that's where I really started responding. And I made improvements so quick someone coaxed me into competing in a show, and the first time I got on stage, I was hooked. And I placed second at my first show, became a teenage national bodybuilding champion at 19, and the story of Jay Cutler started. The hardest part was kind of figuring out, okay, what to eat. Because everyone's like, oh, you gotta eat peanut butter and pasta to get big. That's what the local guys in the gym told me. So I didn't realize that, you know, the thing with bodybuilding is where, you know, I used to eat big meals, right? You have to eat smaller, more frequent meals. So eating meals every 2.5 to 3 hours and having a good breakfast, whereas in high school I ate donuts and stuff like that, but I burned it off. I was doing a lot of labor work, so it wasn't one of those things. I was actually lean all the time. And I did progress so fast, even on this little amount of calories, because like I said, I've been doing labor work my whole life. For the first time, I was going to classes and I was eating in between. I remember eating boxes of cereal in between, because my budget was limited too, because I wasn't making a lot of money. I was working a security job at the time, and it kind of was relative to the field I was getting into with the criminal justice, where, you know, I was trying to lead towards like prison work, or I wanted to be a police officer. So I would sit inside my vehicle outside, you know, doing the security thing, and I would have my microwave there and I'd have my meals, and then I worked at a golf course and I would do, you know, ride machines, and I would actually eat my meals out on the golf course. So it kind of, I did work that was relative. I was a line cook one time and I was cooking at a restaurant, so I was able to eat consistently, and that's the kind of jobs that I took. Although the revenue wasn't really big to be able to support it, my mom actually helped me a lot. She helped me buy chicken breast. She was actually in the service. She was married a military guy, my stepfather, and they would get cheaper chicken breasts at the commissary, so I was able to get, you know, food from them and not spend as much on the budget. And that's really what kind of gave me the edge. And, you know, nutrition, I'd have to say, was the biggest learning curve, but it really put me to the next level, because I learned a lot about it early, and I was able to develop my body like to the fullest potential. There's a lot of off-season to pre-contest weight differences for a lot of bodybuilders. I wasn't one that looked at, okay, I need to bulk up. Like, there's a lot of misconception with bulking. If people think, oh, you need to get fat or out of shape. Whereas I was one of these bodybuilders that, although I did put on weight in the off-season compared to pre-contest, which fluctuated probably about 30 pounds. So if I was 300 pounds in the off-season, I competed like 270. And then at other times, like a lot of times in my career, I would be, you know, 290 off-season, I would compete at 260. I think 260, if I looked back now at my career, was a more relative weight at 5'9" for me to be able to, you know, expand. Of course, a lot of it's fluid retention, some body fat, but I prepared for a competition over 4 months. So I always gave myself 16 weeks to prepare, which gave me enough time to slowly lose body fat and retain the muscle mass or make improvements. And the thing was with me, every show I ever did, I tend to actually be more dedicated and more focused on the nutrition aspect and the consistent training, that it allowed me to make improvements. And I think that's really what kind of built me towards the end. And then I was just competing once a year for the Mr. Olympia. After you win everything else, that's kind of what they do, is we kind of move towards the one crown. So for me, I was about a 30-pound swing. I never believed in gaining a lot of body fat. I always had visible abs and cut thighs in the off season, even at 300 pounds. My goal was just a lot of food. And I would eat 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day, and I would eat 300 to 400 grams of protein a day. So I went by those numbers. So I knew a breakfast, and I would eat probably 6 to 8 meals a day. And the breakfast I ate, I still eat, even being retired. At 44, I still eat the same breakfast. I eat 20 egg whites for breakfast, a couple whole eggs, 2 slices of flour bread, bowl of oatmeal, a cup of coffee, and it's pretty much the same I ate even on a contest diet. Other meals, chicken and rice, steak and rice, but I would eat 12 to 16 ounces of meat every meal, and then I would eat at least 100 grams of carbohydrates every year. The breakfast, I would have 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrates, and the meal after I trained, I'd have 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrates. Those should be your 2 biggest meals of the day. So it's all about meal timing. I always say that, but without putting your body over the edge. So you have to keep your body relatively lean, fluid really didn't matter to me. I intended to retain a lot of water. So for me, the off season, I looked puffy, but I didn't care because that gave me the cushion to be able to train heavy, which was ideal for me. Obviously the heavy weights with repetitions, but it also, when I started dieting, my body leaned out super fast where I was ready 4 weeks out. Usually I didn't have to kill myself to get into shape. Everyone's scared of carbs nowadays, but carbs are a big source of, when you need like fluid to the muscle, or remember, I'm bodybuilding, so I'm looking for the roundest, fullest muscle tissue you can get to perform while you train. And I feel that carbohydrates, you're gonna get that through eating carbs, and it's, like I said, you have to time those and eat them around the training. So anyone even trying to lean out, bulk up, whatever, you gotta get those calories. I tell everyone there's 3 most important meals a day. First meal of the day and the meal before and after training. Those 3 meals, they have to be calorie dense meals. Otherwise you're trying to run a machine on nothing. You need the calories around those meals to be able to perform.
What are the windows of the training windows? So like an hour before training, an hour after training?
I usually eat 1 hour prior to training and within an hour after training. I think those are the ideal windows. Of course, people use a lot of supplements in there too. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. As long as you eat enough calories from food, you don't necessarily need to eat that much, take the supplements around that.
Okay. Can you touch a little bit more on the basic lifts, so squat, bench, and deadlift? How you mentioned you weren't a big fan of machines, you wouldn't like to go heavy. I was watching a video, you T-bar rowing like 8 plates or something like that.
Yeah, so when I started training at the Gold's Gym in '91, remember, this is an era where nowadays there's so much equipment out there. There's hammer strength and there's a lot of leverage machines. We didn't have a lot of that, and hammer strength didn't exist, so the gyms weren't equipped. There was a lot of free weights, a lot of dumbbells. And the thing is with me, what I learned along the way, and as I moved forward and became who I became as Mr. Olympia or whatever, winning the titles, when I traveled around the world, I became in a demand for guest appearances. We were very limited. Some of these gyms I went to only had a lot of free weights, and I had to make do with that. And I trained at home sometimes too. So I would stick to the basic lifts, and that's how I started. I learned off the squat, the deadlift, the shoulder press, bent rows, between dumbbells and barbells. And I was very basic with my training because I didn't want to deviate if I was falling into situations where I didn't have equipped gyms. You can't imagine, I go to these very foreign places and they're like, our gym is great, and you go there and it's 1,000 square feet and it's loaded with more free weights than anything, which is, listen, that's a great gym, but you gotta make do with the exercise that you're used to doing. So if you're used to being equipped on machines all the time, and you have your favorites. Listen, I love hammer strength machines, whatever. I think a lot of those angles are good, but I think you still have to stick to the basics. So at 19, I was a 700-pound squatter. I bench pressed 500 pounds. So, I believe in power. I was squatting until my nose bled. If you didn't squat till your nose bled, then you were doing it wrong. So our mirrors at our gym, you know how it is when you go in those hardcore gyms, the mirrors are covered with spit, but ours, we bleed all over those things, It was crazy. But that's the kind of mentality, that's the kind of place I trained at. Like, the guys were hardcore. We wrapped our knees, we got that weight up there, and trust me, I had my scares, my strains or whatever. I never had a leg injury, but I realized after time that, hey, I didn't need to go that heavy, but I loved the going in there and just killing it and having the strength, But I realized the 1 rep stuff isn't gonna get me to the Olympia stage, and that's where I focused on the 10 to 12 repetitions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. People don't know that, but my legs were my easiest body part to build, and I was known for my legs. When people started talking about this up-and-coming teenager kid in Massachusetts, they talked about the kid with the crazy legs, because I'd had like the best legs in the gym even after a year of training. It was just one of those body parts that it was a sweep, And I didn't actually train my legs from 20 to 23. I didn't even train legs. because I needed my upper body to catch up. I was top 2 in the world for 12 years at my peak. When I started training, I never imagined being Mr. Olympia. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to be financially secure and support my hobby, which was bodybuilding. And I had this vision of, okay, if I can just do guest appearances and make money. And I developed a lot of networks, and that's the thing, is I communicated with a lot of people. I remember when I first started, I would send out like a little sheet, and it would say, you know, guest pose, I'll come, you know, 10-minute guest posing routines, and I would send like a picture and kind of like a bio, and I would send it to all the promoters. I'd have a list in the back of the magazines, and I'd say, you know, I'll come out to your show. And I remember at the time I was charging like $500 or $1,000, and you know, I was known in the magazines, but not super popular. And I would get hired to come to these appearances, and people would like me so much because I was such a people person that they would, you know, bring me back eventually. And then of course it rolled into more and more money. And for me, that was kind of what I was looking to do. But along the way, I actually got better and better and better. You know, I turned pro at 23, which is relatively young. Sat out for a year, and then I came back, and when I was 25, I did the Night of Champions. I finished 11th. And it was very disappointing for me, because coming from a guy that won almost every show I ever did, especially I competed in 3 shows before I got my pro card. It wasn't very difficult to get that card. But then competing, it was a whole next level getting to the pros. I was kind of like, wow, you know, it's a big eye-opener for me. So when I started competing against the guys that I idolized in the magazines, I realized, okay, I need to step my game up. So after 1998 was that Night of Champions, I finished 11th. I said, I'm going to go back to training. I built a home gym. I built a crazy home gym. I spent like $100 grand on equipment, and I was training in my house. And I came back and I finished 3rd at the Pro Ironman and 4th at the Arnold Classic being the second biggest show. So I kind of got in the mix a little bit there, won some prize money, and I was qualified for the Mr. Olympia, which was obviously huge then. I mean, I was one of those guys that like, man, if I could just get on Olympia stage. Went to Olympia and I got dusted. I got second to last. I was 15 out of 16, and I was like, fuck, should I quit? You know, I was like so devastated. I remember saying to my wife at the time, am I just not good, you know? And my trainer, Chris Aceto, who was there, my dietitian, he's like, man, like, I don't get it, because you didn't get compared to some of the guys I thought you could have beat. So we got over that, and I said, you know what, forget it. I had moved to California right after that. Joe Weider, actually, who brought Schwarzenegger, moved me out to California, kind of said, well, I want you closer to the magazines. Why don't you come out here? You can make more money. So I moved to Orange County, and started a new life there with my wife. She was in nursing, so we started training out there. And right when I got to California, to be honest, I mean, everyone's dream when you live on the East Coast, Massachusetts, was, man, California is like the place. But we always thought the guys trained like pussies in California, you know? So I'm like, if I can go out there with my work ethic, I can go out there and dominate, you know? Because I felt we did train harder. And we didn't have the nice weather, and I remember going to the gym in work boots and like the snowing and shit, and the gym would get, you know, they'd close the gym early. So I'm like, man, we're gonna go out to California, we're gonna crush it. So the day I moved out there, I woke up in the morning and it was like I was smiling in the sun, and I'm like, this is gonna be a new venture for me. Sure enough, later, six months later, after placing 15th at the Mr. Olympia, I went to the Night of Champions, the first pro show I did, and I won my first pro show. And right then I was like, okay, this is a run. And I went to Olympia in the fall, and I got 8th. So I moved up half the position from the year prior. And then I went over to, sat out the next year, and I said, you know, I'm gonna train solely for the Mr. Olympia. And I came back to the Olympia, and that's the first time I got second to Ronnie Coleman. And that's the first time ever in my career I realized I could actually win the Mr. Olympia competition. Like, anyone never asked me, like these young kids come up to me at events and they say, I'm gonna be a Mr. Olympia. I never said that until I stood next to Ronnie Coleman at 2001, and it was a controversial second. I could have won that show, and I placed second. And then I said, holy shit, I'm gonna win this contest at some point. So I said, you know, I'll come back. You know, I went to the Arnold in 2002, won my first Arnold. I was on a roll. Won there. The Mark Henry won the strongman portion of that side. You know, that was Like they started doing the heavy strongman stuff. First year they gave the H2 Hummer. I won the H2 Hummer alongside Mark Henry. And then I skipped the Olympia in 2002. I was building a house in Vegas. I moved to Las Vegas to train for the Olympia, be closer to where the Olympia was, because it was held every year in Vegas. And then the role started after that. 2003, I won Arnold again, placed second at Ronnie Coleman again, 2003, which I thought I was going to win it. He came back like a monster that year. It was just crazy. It was the best Ronnie we ever seen. He was like 280 pounds and ripped, and it was like no one was going to beat him that year. No matter how good. In that year, I was really on a roll. I had just won the Arnold, and I was like the new up-and-coming future Mr. Olympia. So that continued. 2004, same thing. Going to Olympia, I thought I was going to win. Second again, you know. And then 2005, same thing, you know, second again to Ronnie Coleman. And I said, this is it. Like, he's, you know, I got to put a package together that's going to beat this guy. So he had been coming in bigger. I came in really, like, we both came in really conditioned 2005. Very similar, but he was still a little bigger than me. I said, you know what, 2006, I'm going to come back. I'm going to just be fuller and bigger. And that's when I finally knocked him off and won the Olympia in 06. And pretty much after that, I mean, he came back in 07. He was probably fourth that year. I won 07. And then 08, Olympia comes, and I got second. I lost the title to Dexter Jackson, came in a little off. And that just, you know, pissed me off to the max. And, you know, I trained my ass off. I got a whole new revamp, the whole thing. I started working with Hani Rambod for 2009. We got a new team together. I was flying guys in and out of Vegas as training partners, and I came back and won the title, probably the best title I ever won in Mr. Olympia. Dominating fashion. Came back, just like all the famous shots from 2009 where I just walked out on stage and demolished everyone. And then again in 2010, won the next one, and then after that, I mentioned the bicep injury happened in 11, 3 weeks prior. Lost title to Phil Heath, and you know, I stepped away in 12 and came back in 13, but I finished sixth that year. So kind of, it was a really good run for a lot of years, but I mean, I can go into depth a lot. Like the battles with Ronnie Coleman were like, that's what people talk about in bodybuilding. They remember, you know, when the shows were kind of built up, the Mr. Olympia, you know, you get 15 to 20 guys qualifying each year. But no one gave a shit about anyone but me and Ronnie. Like the whole advertisement was the Ronnie Coleman Jay Cutler show, because they knew it was going to be 1 and 2. And bodybuilding hasn't had that. I mean, you talk about the days when it was like Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno or Franco Colombo. There's never been that rivalry like that. And I think that's what bodybuilding misses nowadays, because we were like the guys that it was for sure we were going to be the 1-2 guys. And when Ronnie stepped away, it definitely wasn't as meaningful for me competing at the Olympia. A lot of new guys were coming in, and I remember every year it was like, oh, this guy's coming up, and then there was another guy, and then they didn't follow through. So as a champion, you're always dealing with people on the up and coming, right? But I didn't give a shit. I was just like, you know, I'm coming for what's mine, and I knew I had work to get there. And I had a great run. I mean, it was top 2 in the world for 12 years, and you know, not many people can say that. If there was no Ronnie Coleman, I'd probably be the record holder at this point. But I was battling probably the greatest Mr. Olympia we ever seen. Best body. I mean, he was a power trainer. I mean, he was a guy that, I mean, he squatted 800 pounds, and, you know, he'd bench press, you know, 500 pounds for 12 repetitions. I mean, pretty easily. So, like, he was probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, bodybuilder ever. And it took some toll on his body. I mean, he's had a few injuries since then, but for me, it was always the repetitions, and yes, I trained hard and heavy, but you know, winning those titles, it's not easy. You have to build the density. I mean, I always say density is like the key to becoming the best bodybuilder, and that means a lot of depth of physique, and that's years and years of training, consistent training. So I've stepped away from this fall will be 5 years I've stepped away from the bodybuilding stage, and a lot of these fans out there still want to see a comeback, because there's been a lot of comebacks in bodybuilding. And for the past 5 years, I've been working in the supplement industry. I've been on the show promotional side for the amateur divisions, a lot of NPC. I have like 5 NPC shows that carry my name. But I'm still out there every weekend promoting, and that's the thing is, when you compete for as long as I did and you become so popular, people still want to see you. And I didn't get to travel to every place because I was so I was so regimented in what I was doing, and I lived like what I call a boxy lifestyle. So my day was eating, sleeping, training. I didn't travel at all when I trained for the competition. So for 4 months, I wouldn't do anything. And when I did, there was limited time between, especially competing at Arnold Classic and Olympia, where I only had so many weeks to travel, and then I would be home and staying and training for competition. So I've used a lot of my networks now to be able to travel, promote the brand, work with still a lot of my sponsors, open up new direction of what we're doing. And social media has changed bodybuilding a lot. It's given me great opportunities, just exactly why I'm here today, to be able to, meet new faces and kind of tell my story a little bit and what kind of goes on, because people only saw what was in magazines or kind of what's on social media. And I think people only put out there what they want, but I think there's a lot of things that people want to know. I found that the fans recognized and enjoyed more of my in-home living than when I was doing chest in the gym or legs in the gym. They wanted to see like really what was kind of going on outside the gym, see how it relates to their lifestyle. So now being able to interact with people, I mean, that's kind of my thing. Is like I want to kind of get out there, tell my story, give people the opportunity to meet me, do the seminars, and I'm still very, very active. I'm going to continue to do that, and be the best I can still be. And I'm still in the gym at least 5 days a week. That's the most important thing. I can honestly tell you at 44, my biggest priority of the day is going to the gym. Like I still train for an hour. I get up every day, I do cardio. My goals body-wise aren't what they used to be. I'm just trying to stay more fit, just trying to stay healthy. I want to live a longer time. I'm trying to spend more time with family, friends that I was very selfish pushing away, because listen, bodybuilding is a very, very individual business where, I was in the gym 4 times a day when I was training for Olympia titles. I mean, I would do 2 cardio sessions, 2 weight sessions. The rest was spent cooking. I was eating 7 meals a day. It would take me an hour just a lot to eat a lot of those meals. So I was spending 7 hours just eating my food, never mind the cooking process and the resting in between and the times you spend at the gym. I mean, it's 11 hours between training and eating. It was crazy. So for me, it's definitely a difference living on the other side and being on the retired side. I can appreciate a lot more what the guys are going through now. So when I watch a fitness or bodybuilding show, I can say, wow, those athletes, I mean, there's probably nothing that's harder than training for a bodybuilding.